Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Julia, thank you for doing those introductions and welcoming everyone. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Sinjan for leading our earlier NTP Partners and Schools Roundtable so magnificently. You guys are very lucky that Sinjan will be doing that again, I'm sure, from here until 3 p.m. So yes, welcome to our second NTP Partners and Schools Roundtables today, 2 p.m. on Thursday, the 1st of July. As I said, we are again joined by Sinjan Burkett as chair, and alongside Sinjan today will be a number of panelists who make up the leadership teams of both NTP Tuition Partners, and we also have Zach Rawlinson, who has been working alongside Vanessa as part of the Tute NTP program. You will know Vanessa from our previous event, from the panel with Lee Elliott-Major. For those of you who were there earlier, thank you, Vanessa, for joining us for that. It was a really in-depth discussion, and we taught Lee just as much as he taught us, I think. So joining Vanessa as panelists will be James Grant, the co-founder of hugely successful tutoring platform MyTutor, Tom Hooper, who is the founder and CEO of Third Space Learning, and Scott Kelly, who is the Director of Tuition and Special Educational Needs and Disabilities at Teaching Personnel. Our panelists make up the vanguard of pushing tutoring forwards into mainstream education in this country. And so we are delighted and very lucky to be joined by them today. As I did at 11:01 this morning, Sinjan, I'm going to hand over to you again to lead this discussion here.
Okay. Anybody want to add to their introduction before we get started? Okay. In the previous, not my previous discussion, the previous session, there's been a discussion. In fact, when I just logged on just now, before this session started, there was discussion about whether tutors need to be teachers, which is an interesting thought, isn't it? If I say I was involved in a program in which was training people to become head teachers who were not teachers. Okay, so that's very interesting. So anybody got any thoughts on that? Do tutors need to be teachers?
I'm happy to start if you like.
Yeah, go on then.
I mean, we've worked with qualified and unqualified tutors and teachers, if you like, for years. But if we were going to keep it to NTP and tutoring, I guess, I would have to say they don't have to be. A qualified teacher status, obviously shows a level of training and accreditation and experience. But we've got some fantastic tutors that have come from industry or come from different sectors into the tutoring world and demonstrated so much success and progress that I would definitely not want to rule them out of being a possibility of being utilised as tutors, and that's across age groups as well, probably more secondary, but we've got some really good tutors in primary as well. Equally, qualified teachers are very good. So there's my neutral on the fence, but still I'm a big fan of unqualified as well as qualified.
Okay, that leads beautifully into another question then, which is how do any of you as an organisation, and let's ask Vanessa this one, how do you as an organisation ensure that tutors are following best practice?
Well, as I mentioned on the previous call, and I know that a few people here were listening to that, so I won't repeat too much. But when we first started teaching online 8 years ago, there was nowhere that gave us best practice, to be honest. We've had to build that ourselves. And we did that by bringing classroom best practice, so good elements of pedagogical practice in the classroom, into Tute, and then sort of develop that into the online world. So what we do, we think that's best practice. We have done some research into it. We know that the outcomes of our students are good. We know that the students enjoy the lessons. So what we do is we train our tutors quite rigorously in how to deliver lessons in the way that we think works best using our platform and our processes and procedures. And that is a really crucial part of our delivery.
Okay, so that sort of implies that, let's go to James, because what Vanessa was saying there was sort of implied that there are real skills which are involved in tutoring, which may be different to those skills which perhaps a teacher might need. Would you agree with that? Was there?
I definitely do agree with that, and I think just a kind of leading into the original question of like, can you have unqualified tutors fulfilling a good role in the tuition space? I would start with the question of why is tuition needed and what role is tuition playing? to students and within schools. And if we take the NTP specifically, I think that there's a robust evidence base behind tutoring. We know that it's something that is helpful for students. And schools have been doing forms of tutoring for many years, whether using their own teachers or large groups, one-on-one, external partnerships. And for me, I think it's really important that tuition is something, and personalized learning is something that's available for every student, but schools don't have the capacity to offer it. So if your starting point is that tuition is robust and we need a scalable solution to it, then if you're purely looking in the world of qualified teachers, who are obviously many of whom really good tutors, then you're not going to find a nationwide systemic solution as a standalone offering.
Yeah.
And so when I look at MyTutor, so for context, for those of you who don't know MyTutor, we exclusively work with university students and recent graduates as our tutors. And we're not saying that's the only way to do it, certainly not. But the reason we do it is that these tutors are offering something different to what's in class. And so there's absolutely a slightly different role that tutors play to teachers. What we do need to complement that with is a lot of training, quality assurance, rigorous interview processes. And so I think that you have to have an extra level of care when you're introducing someone who's new to the world of tutoring, but also appreciate that a tutor doesn't necessarily need to be able to deal with certain things that teachers do, like the behaviors of a class or the administration of being a teacher. So I think there's a micro point, which is being aware of the differences, but a macro point of if you're trying to solve a big problem in the education system, then you need scalable solutions, and that involves a wide range of tutors.
Yeah, okay, moving on from that, let's just go back to Vanessa for a minute, because on the Tute website, you've got one of your mission statements is we want to be the first choice online teaching partner for schools, local authorities and non-mainstream settings. So explain the phrase teaching partner in the context that James just been talking about.
Well, the reason that we take a partnership approach is we want to work with the school. We want to be a part of their ecosystem, if you like. We want to be an option when other things may not work, and to work alongside their curriculum. So from kind of a philosophical perspective, we want to be a partner, we want to be a part of that school. But also from an operational perspective, what we mean by partnership is that we want to do as much of the heavy lifting for schools as possible. They're very, very busy. So working as a partner, having close relationships with our team, and it's very much about relationships. We've learned that, really quickly in the NTP especially. We want to do much of the heavy lifting for them so that they don't have to do as much. So we want them to focus on choosing the right students for our tuition, and for them to then tell us, this is what we want you to teach these students, and then we'll go away and then we'll pick it up from there.
Okay, so looking at the, let's go to Tom, because Tom, your website, you've got closing the maths attainment gap. Why is the closing the attainment gap the focus?
Why do we do that, or why is it important?
Yeah, why is it a focus? Why is it right up there on the top of the page on your website?
I suppose it reflects a number of things. Our motivation as individuals and a team. It's what we do. So since 2013, we've worked with over 90,000 children. We've delivered 1.1 million sessions to state schools in England. And over half of those children have been eligible for free school meals. So it's what we do. That's the entire purpose of the model. That's the impact that we've had. And I'll relate it back to the points you've raised. Tutors don't have to be teachers. Teaching is a far more sophisticated and challenging job than being a tutor. We need teachers in classrooms, leading from the front, leading that group dynamic. We need more of them, frankly, particularly in maths, and we need to support them. We need to provide better support for teachers. And tutoring within the school environment can be a very good support service if designed correctly, such that it works in sync with teaching strategies, it's informed by teachers, and it plugs learning gaps as they arise in class. That's what the research says, that's what common sense would suggest as well. And that's what we design third space learning to do. So in terms of how we design our tutor training, our performance management, our professional development, the curriculum we use and how that fits into programs of learning that operate in sync with the scheme of work that the school's using and what the children are doing week in, week out, day in, day out, so that it works in harmony with small group and the large group learning of class, of school.
Okay, so we've got very distinct mission between each organisation, very distinct one organisation to the next. But just taking that on, Scott, what is the best way to support a tutor?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, we have a branch network, so all of our tutors are connected to people within our organisations that they can go to. But behind that, we've got a lot of professional development and personal development opportunities, either directly with us or through one of our partner organisations. When it comes to tutoring, we actually put together a toolkit designed with a number of modules for somebody who's right at the start of their tuition journey and just entering the profession, to some of the ones that have been teachers or been tutors for a long time, that maybe have missed out on development opportunities and have found their way to us, and we look to try and move them on. So we provide all that free training for them, but we are considerate that everyone's in a different place and in a different part of their journey. So some very experienced. We had to do a lot of work with online engagement, because online engagement is something that up until January last year we hadn't done a lot of. So we had to change our model we had to widen our model, which was largely a face-to-face one, to include the online tuition. So there was a lot of learning done there internally for us, as well as going out into the market and getting the right research to put the right courses together. So we used a company called Best Practice Network, who developed those modules for us and with us. Yeah.
Okay. So that sounds very clear. If I go to Zach then, what that sort of model and what you've heard so far, what is it that schools need? Are the organisations you're working with in the school providing the sort of thing that you need? Are tutors coming prepared?
Yeah, I think I agree with what James and Tom have said about the need for qualified teacher status. They don't need that. I think in terms of the feedback I get from my students, the most important qualities are, patience, kindness, a willingness to listen, not minding if the same question gets asked several times in a row. I'm sorry if there's a lot of background noise here. Year 8 are just tearing down the stairway, the stairs, and leaving like a herd of elephants. So, but yeah, you like those noises, okay? Yeah, no, I agree with what everyone said. I think the feedback from the students, none of my students have fed back to me that they were concerned whether their tutor had qualified teacher status. They care whether they feel more confident answering exam questions, whether they get that patience and that kindness that they can target an area they find challenging and really get to the bottom of it and feel more confident in their lessons. And that's the kind of feedback that we've been getting. And that's the kind of feedback we want. Yeah,
okay. I'm going to pick on one of your words, James. The word kindness there. Are all your tutors kind? How do you make sure that they come in with that sort of attitude?
Yeah, it's a fantastic point from Zach. I think so. We started MyTutor about 8 years ago now, and we work with both families away from schools, but then also with schools like Zach's. And one of my early learnings was the difference between offering tuition directly to a family outside a school and the way you work with a school. So Tom made a point about how collaborative the tutoring is with the school, and where teachers are really informed of what's going on. But relating to kindness in particular, I think some of the students that we're really trying to help in a school setting, they really sometimes lack confidence. And when you're dealing with university students as tutors who have really excelled in their exams often, we need to make sure that we've trained and tested against that empathy and that sort of awareness and understanding that some of the students they're helping might have had different backgrounds to them, different circumstances, might have very particular reasons that have sort of led them to become unconfident or disengaged. And so it's about collaborating with the school to make sure that we understand those settings and training our tutors to be very, very aware, not just naturally empathetic, but also aware of why those things might be why the confidence might be lacking.
Yeah, okay. And go on to Vanessa then. What have you had to train your tutors to do differently for the NTP program that they might not have had before?
We haven't really had to change our training program, because this is what we always did. The only difference is that our group sizes are smaller now, and there's a bit more rigidity around the program itself. So we haven't really had to do anything different. We've certainly scaled up our training, and we've made it more rigorous and made it more structured. So one, the tutors get a better experience, but also so we can scale quicker, because that's been a challenge. You know, we've onboarded a new 150 teachers this year, so we've needed to do that in order to scale as well. But you know, it's a long process supporting a tutor, and I think it begins in planning and training and equipping them with the ability to tutor well, and then continually supporting them after that. So we have an ongoing quality assurance process where members of our core team, so we have a core team of employed teachers, and then a wider team of teachers who contract their service to us. So the team who are employed, we like to think of them as the experts in online learning because they've been doing it for so long. So they provide mentorship and support under the direction of our head of teaching and learning to those other contracted teachers. So they'll observe some lessons and they will give feedback, very collaborative. We've had a conversation recently about, to get more lessons observed, shall we cut down on the time that we give feedback? We've decided no, that is where it's most valuable. So that we spend more time in the feedback so that tutor can ask and you know, they can have a really good discussion about good teaching and learning and good tutoring. And then it's just ongoing support and making them feel very much a part of the team as well, because, you know, most of them are working remotely, they're not employed by us. So we aim in every way that we can to make them feel a part of the team, that they belong, and that they feel that they know and understand what Tute's mission is and why and how they fit into that overall vision and mission statement.
Okay, so is that how do schools contribute to that and supporting that Vanessa's just described?
In terms of, sorry, I've got a lot of noise right here, right now.
How do schools best support tutors to be the best they can when they come? What would you advise all schools to do?
Well, I think that this has been something that's built for us over time since we've been working with MyTutor, and we've now got to a stage where the teachers of the students who are getting the tutoring are actually, you know, much more directly contributing to what's going on in the tutoring sessions, in the lessons with MyTutor. And so there's more of a kind of feedback loop into the classroom, as well as, you know, of what's going on with MyTutor. So I think that's absolutely key, and I think that will only sort of improve as things go on, and as the classroom teachers get used to using the portal to upload sort of resources and topics for the students to work on. So if I could hear you properly, I think that would, hopefully I've answered the question. It was about how we can work with the tutors to improve the experience and the effectiveness of the tuition. Is that right?
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
I think it's about that. I think it's making sure that the tutors are, you know, focusing on areas. I mean, we've also realized that it's much more effective for us to have, you know, maybe slightly shorter term programs of lessons with MyTutor, which focus on very specific areas for each subject. And I think that also helps in terms of keeping things quite tight in terms of the content and making sure that they're targeting what we want them to.
Yeah. So Tom, does that match your model? Is that the sort of advice you would give to tutors about working with schools?
Yeah, it's similar. I mean, we just focus on maths, which actually makes it a bit easier for us. So yeah. But the way Third Space works is each child sets a program of learning. So teachers can either pick the lessons directly from our curriculum, or what about 80% of them do is they'll pick 3 strands of learning from kind of year 5 topic as an example category. We then set a diagnostic assessment for the pupil on the platform that creates a sequence of lessons for them over that term or 15-hour block as per the NTP, which that student and tutor will work through. We've then got hundreds of learning objectives, which is mini lesson plans, which then make up a session and make up a program. So it creates a lot of structure to the learning, a lot of transparency for the teachers so they can see what's happening. Teachers have access to those lesson plans as well. And then that creates reporting to track progress and feed back into the class environment. So all the systems and the learning design within Third Space is intended to make it as easy as possible for tutor, student, and teacher to work together on as personalized and accurate a basis as is possible. Because, you know, quite obviously, teachers are incredibly busy. You know, just doing their normal job of designing class learning. Actually, if they have to then instruct 20 tutors on top of that, that's not going to work. So we have to design systems that are purposed specifically for integrating one-to-one tuition within the school and class environment.
So what variety and variation a tutor's able to bring to that? What are the elements that you would say a tutor brings, which is above and beyond that very structured lesson program?
Tutors are able to move across the curriculum from the learning objectives or learning gaps, should I say, that are diagnosed. Tutors are able to bring in kind of ancillary tools, documents, resources, but it's, and it follows kind of common sense as well as research. The best thing you can do is diagnose at the start of the lesson, what is the learning gap that child has? That's going to create the maximum impact within that space of time for that tutor to work with that student. Now, clearly, as they start working together through that session or across that term, they've got to have the latitude to use the tutor's expertise to go with the direction that the student is working toward. But, come back to that question of how do you equip the tutor with the best possible kind of framework to do a good job? Well, first and foremost, you're going to want to provide good curriculum and resources based around the diagnosed learning gap that originates from the teacher's instruction as per what they need to learn in class.
Yeah, because they're quite high order skills, aren't they? Do you find that that's quite a demand on tutors, or it
is. Yeah, absolutely. And I think our job as third space learning is to try and make sure that we bring kind of intelligence to that experience, but also we make it as easy as possible for tutors to navigate that. Because of course, if they're trying to focus on the child, but also navigate a sort of complex curriculum and kind of interface, that's not good. So you want that intelligence to be as invisible as possible, so that it allows them to give the best possible experience to that child, and kind of symmetrically for the teacher. You don't want them wading through the third space learning platform. You want it to be really light touch, so they can be really confident that the direction of tuition for that child and the reporting and resources that come back to the teacher is easy, is transparent, and is great quality. And the teacher can have confidence that this is a service that supports their teaching, and is easy, is a joy to use. And that's difficult. We don't always get it right, but I think the kind of the fundamental design that's in place is one that's solid, it's logical. And each month, each term, each year, we're trying to improve it to make it, as I said, kind of easy and accurate.
Yeah, okay, right. So Scott, then, what else is there that tutors bring along and try to get from the pupils that they work with? So, for example, things like a desire to learn, things like enthusiasm. How do they foster that in the students they're working with?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I to follow on from Tom as well as with the NTP and our general tutoring offer.
Shut the door.
Oh, that's okay. I'll carry on. I think you can hear me. So
and noise.
So it is offering those words that Zach mentioned, like kindness, and I think it was Tom mentioned collaboration and what have you. Is our tutors will work with the school on agreed learning outcomes, and those learning outcomes will include personal outcomes often as well. So yes, it's absolutely very important to move them along in the subject requested, and in the NTP we may have schools coming to us saying that maths is the identified area. They may choose to use our assessment tools, or they may come to us with their own assessments that they've carried out to identify who they are, and then agree some other areas. And that may be actually sharing some development or some challenges that child's having or that they've had, especially over the sort of the COVID periods, or personal challenges that they're having with communication or writing or whatever the subject is. So I think getting that joined up, we offer assessment tools, but we don't make it compulsory, because often the school will come to us with very clear ideas of what they would like our tutors to work on. So I think getting a good balance of that attainment, achievement, and sort of personal development is something we try to offer with our all-round tuition offering, and that's what we promote to our tutors as well.
Yeah. Okay, so Zach, on the same question, really, we heard this morning that secondaries often put tutoring sessions at the end of the day. How do you ensure that students are not at that point weary or tired because it's going beyond their normal learning day?
Well, my school's lucky because we have a staggered arrival time for key stage 3, 4, and 5. So we have students at each key stage arriving and leaving at different times of the day, which means that I know that for year 9, I can give them a MyTutor session that starts at 2:30, and while that's extending their day by an hour, it's not really too much. We wouldn't be organising sessions for year 11 on a day where they finish at 3:45 to start at 4:30, because it's going to cause problems and it will be counterproductive. So I think, we choose the end of the day because, with the kind of research around the teenage body and circadian rhythms and all the rest of it, it's difficult to get them in early in the morning. And we've got a captive audience. So we've got, on the one hand, a kind of logistical question to consider. On the other hand, what will actually make the sessions work best. But from my experience, it's really more about, it's not so much about whether it's in the afternoon or the morning, it's about getting the buy-in from the student in the first place. If they're kind of running to the session because they're engaged with the technology and they've got a good relationship with the tutor, and they can see the benefits of the sessions, and it's there's an end in sight, it's short and focused, then it really probably becomes a secondary consideration whether we do it in the morning or the afternoon, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. So Vanessa, what are the youngest pupils that you work with, your tutors work with?
Key stage 1.
Key stage 1,
Key
okay.
stage 1 all the way through to Key stage 4. We have actually had a request this week to put a programme together, not NTP because it doesn't support it, but for younger children. So those in.
So in terms of those personal attributes that tutors are trying to achieve with pupils, what's the difference between a Key Stage 1 and a Key Stage 4? What is there any difference in the sort of confidence they're looking for example?
No, not really. I think it starts from the tutor. So of course, if they're teaching Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, because we contract employed teachers, they would be a primary teacher. And those are Key Stage 3 and 4. But actually what this is allowing people to do through tutoring is some of our primary teachers are expressing an interest in wanting to do Key Stage 3 and 4 and vice versa. So we're supporting them through that. I don't think there are any specific characteristics, to be honest. Certainly Key Stage 1 and 2 engage differently in the online environment. They like to talk, they like to unmute themselves, whereas at Key Stage 3 and 4, they prefer to use the chat box. So the engagement is different, as it would be in any classroom. As a teacher, I would get on a chair as a languages teacher and would do Simon Says with my year 7s, whereas with my year 11s, that wasn't quite what they wanted to do. So you just adapt, don't you?
Yeah, so are there any limitations then on the ages that a tutor could work with, other than personal preference?
I think it depends on the outcomes that are desired from the school. So if if the school wants us to work on getting a student from a particular grade at GCSE to another, of course you have to have somebody who's experienced in delivering that. So I'd say yes to that, depending on the desired outcome from the school.
Yeah,
I think it also, Sinja, I was going to add, it also depends on the mode of learning. For us, it's all online tuition. And I think once you start getting down to year 3, we would always advise the school don't use us. So kind of predominantly we do year 5 and 6 and then pushing up into Key Stage 3 and 4. But I think for the younger children, tuition can be hugely advantageous, but it does need to be in person, I think.
Yes, yeah.
I disagree, Tom, to be honest, because we thought the same, because we started Key Stage 3 and 4, and we've moved outside the NTP into a bit of alternative provision, or more alternative provision in the past few years. Brilliant. And I would say the same back then. I'd say, Key Stage 2, not so much. And then we went down to Key Stage 2 because the need was there, and then down again to Key Stage 1 because the need was there. And as I say, we've had that request this week. So I think just adapting it a little bit, like our Key Stage 1 lessons are shorter, for example, they're 30 minutes. So keeping the students engaged, there's usually somebody with them. I think it can work.
Yeah, it's a fair point. We haven't tried to adapt for it. We've just found what we currently provide for predominantly year 5 and 6 hasn't been appropriate for kind of year 3 and below. So we say no, but you make a good point that if you adapt it, or if we adapted it, maybe it would, but we haven't tried to.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's very, the distinctiveness, as I say, between the organisations is really quite striking and a very useful one to make as well. Let me just go to James. Where tutoring takes place, just tell me about the importance of having the right environment. What does the right environment look like?
So this was something we thought quite deeply about in the kind of early days, and I think where the thinking took us was around the story behind why someone's doing a program or working with MyTutor. And so Where we found things not work so well is when a program is seen as a punishment or something that a student feels ashamed about. So I think the feeling of a student and the way something is framed is one of the biggest drivers for success.
Yeah.
And so we worked quite hard to think about how can we launch a program, what sort of materials can we put in, how do we really engage students up front? And I think actually, to be totally honest, there's a lot more work we could do there. Like it's a real learning curve for us, and maybe one of the most difficult things to get right. In terms of just like a more factual answer, I think building something into the school day tends to build better engagement, where a student feels like it's just part of going to school to be part of this program rather than an optional extra at the end. At home, programs can work, particularly for older students, so maybe A-level students. But what we've found is one of the big changes in dynamics during COVID is the way that parents have got involved with their children's education. So whereas before in our school programs, we never ever really heard anything from the parents, now all of a sudden, if something goes slightly wrong, some of the teachers are phoning us up saying, look, we've just had a call from so-and-so's parents and they were a little bit disappointed about this thing, but they loved this thing and we'd like more of that, please, and less of this. And that engagement is forcing us to reconsider how we engage the parents as a stakeholder as well, because they're part of this journey too. And we know that parental buy-in leads to better outcomes. So I've gone around and about in a few places, but it's a great question, a really difficult one to solve for. But I think it starts with the way you frame with the student that this is a reward, this is part of like an effective education for them. Working with sort of students from universities can also be quite aspirational too. So there are added benefits beyond just academic performance and around confidence, aspirations. So yeah, that's my best answer there.
Okay, well, Scott, listening to that then, what do teaching personnel do differently now they didn't before the NTP?
In terms of tutoring, so well, before the NTP, we'd only actually probably experienced 6 to 12 months of online tuition. So going online was a whole new area for us. We already did a lot of work in the home, but it was face-to-face. So there were some big adjustments to be made there. We found that a lot of the schools, there were a lot of schools actually coming to us for consultation actually and saying what's working well with you and your other schools that you're working with. So where possible, we've sort of steered the schools to do it within the school day, not just for making sure that the attendance is higher and some of the points that James has highlighted around not seen as an add-on or more work to do in a school day, but also for tutor availability as well, to access to some of the better tutors. Not just the better tutors, but that database becomes a lot wider. So there's more options that you can provide across the whole school day than just in those 1 or 2 hours after a school day completes as well. So I think one of the learns for us was that when it went to online and online at home in particular, that communication had to be just so clear between us, the school, and the families. Otherwise, there were challenges with children being able to have the right accessibility or understand how they can get onto a platform or to fix it if something goes wrong. So we definitely learned a lot in that early lockdown period in January for us.
Yeah, I'm looking at one of the pages on your website, online tuition for looked after children. So that's a very specific audience. So are there audiences that are accessing this tutoring of similar nature, such as special needs, for example, who are much more prevalent now than they were before?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm guessing the page you're looking at there is to do with, we work with around 80 virtual schools around the country. So we do a lot of work pre-COVID with face-to-face tutoring, which is now a hybrid of both online and face-to-face. So that was a huge tutoring area and was our largest tutoring area before we got more into the school tuition as well as that supplementary provision to add on to the current school day. So I would say that in the NTP, I thought we would engage more of the SEN community than we did. We certainly did around the alternative provisions and pupil referral units, but from the feedback from the NTP and from our experience is that they were disappointed there wasn't more engagement. But I think partly that's to do with the flexibility of the actual program of the NTP, and not that there's not a desire for additional support or tutoring opportunities.
I'll just echo what Scott said there, that we had a similar experience with the NTP, that for students with special educational needs or certain other sort of environments outside of sort of the regular school day, we didn't see as much engagement due to the lack of flexibility. So a lot of people wanted perhaps higher dose tutoring, for example, so more regular sessions rather than sort of 15 weekly slots, as one example.
Yeah, okay. And Tom, on that, one of the points Lee Elliott Major made on the on Radio 4 a couple of days ago was that it's those pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds who are most likely to have difficulties accessing online provision. Is that your experience?
Oh yeah, massively so. And I think it was really unfair that the NTP got so maligned for the proportion of children who were eligible for free school meals on that basis. So, and I'll give you an example. When lockdown kicked in, or the second school closure kicked in January, we were due to be working with 16,000 children a week from that first week in January, and we were able to switch about 8,000 of them to working from home.
Yeah.
But the remaining 8,000, schools said to us, look, we're not going to try, because we know that both the technical setup and the kind of personal setup at home will make it too hard for them to access this. So it was directly a result of that digital divide. So, for all the stuff on free laptops, which is great and it's an important start, it had a massive impact. Massive impact. I don't think anyone should be particularly surprised at that, but quite clearly, if wealthier children in houses with better equipment and better infrastructure are going to be better equipped to access online tuition, right? So if you kind of switch everything to that mode of delivery, who's going to miss out? It's going to be the more disadvantaged children, and that was reflected in the NTP numbers. And we saw it firsthand across thousands of children. Yeah.
Okay. Let me bring Simon in. Simon Bush. Is that, presumably you've experienced that? Is there a way around that?
Oh, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I actually come from a school with high levels of deprivation, and our trusts were brilliant at getting us the devices that our kids need. And I just wanted to go on from the conversation about the challenges of getting children online. I think with that challenge also comes the time you choose to do the tutoring. And that was certainly a challenge for us here at the Greenway. Could you repeat your question for us, please? Because I'm reflecting on the last comment that was made.
Yes, yeah. Really, have you found any successful ways of ensuring that the tutoring is accessible online for those disadvantaged pupils?
Yes, we have. It requires work and it requires staff members. We don't sit the tutor. We do it during the school day. That has also implications on the wider curriculum offer in the afternoons. But we have a dedicated member of support staff who leads the group of children and are responsible for them. We have an SLT member who coordinates the programme in school and is in charge of that programme. It's almost run like a mini school. With Tute as our key partner and their tutors. That's very important. You have an SLT member. We also have dedicated TAs who listen into the sessions and follow the sessions with the children as well. Because we started with year 3. We've done English programs and maths programs and found them both to be successful with the kids. But you need that buy-in from primary schools, because the issue in primary schools is, when are you going to do it? Because if you expect the children to do it at home, then I don't think the offer would be as rich and you wouldn't have as big a take up. And you've got to dedicate the time during the school day. And I suppose, going on for what I mentioned before, that's our biggest challenge. And that is the challenge that you'll hear back from schools. So tuition partners who are on the call today, one of the hardest things for primary and maybe not secondary schools, there might be, but primary is when you're going to do it. When you're going to fit. We had a lot of allocation at the Greenway Academy in Hull, lots of allocation, and we had to spend that money and use that allocation. We're under a lot of pressure to try and get those groups organised into a pattern during the school day. But it's run successfully. But you do need that member of staff that's dedicated to it in the primary section, in sector, and the SLT support.
Let's just get a secondary perspective on that, Zach, if you wouldn't mind. We've heard what Simon's got to say about primary. How does that compare and match up in secondary?
Well, okay, so I agree in terms of we're lucky again. We've got a huge learning resource centre with 95 PCs where we can get the kids to go and do their online tutoring session. In terms of how deprivation, we're also a school with one of the highest levels of deprivation in the country. And again, we struggled and got lots of devices out, but deprivation really isn't just an issue in terms of have you got a device and have you got Wi-Fi? As I'm sure Simon will agree, it's also about, do you have a space to work? Is your inclination to take part in the session going to be affected by all the people who are there? And we've got a lot of people living in small spaces. So what has worked for us in terms of engaging that or overcoming those obstacles really is having a very open and honest conversation with the students who kind of have to do it from home because there's a timetable clash or there's some reason why they can't do it from school. So that we kind of visualize that and go through that whole process, overcoming the obstacles, and they commit to putting those solutions in place. And then we've had quite good attendance and quite good engagement from those students. But you still get lessons missed because of the circumstances and the environment, and the Wi-Fi will drop off, or something like that. So that's what I'd say, sort of in response as a secondary perspective to what Simon said.
Yeah. Okay. What about the timetabling of the sessions?
In terms of the timings of it, I think again, like we for the students who are doing it, who we've got at school doing it, again, we're kind of limited in terms of what we can do. I mean, I could try and put those sessions on earlier, but I think that would cause more problems than picking the slightly early finishes they have in the afternoon to do it with them then. And as I do really believe what I said earlier, which is that if they can see the point and the value, and they can see how long the length of the program of lessons is, and they start to build that relationship with the tutor, and they start to see the benefit and the impact in the classroom and in their own confidence, the timing is less of an issue. It is much, for me, more about them wanting to engage and wanting to take part, and then not having negative experiences once they do buy into it. And that has thankfully been very, very minimal.
Okay, thanks, Zach. Let me ask Vanessa, moving on a bit, what's most effective? Is it individual, paired, or small group tutoring?
We haven't done anything but 1 to 3 in the NTP. We chose not to do 1 to 1 and 1 to 2. But we, business as usual, we do 1 to 12, and that's successful as well. I mean, different circumstances, again, desired outcomes are really important. What does the school really want out of it? But we know that our teachers tend to prefer the small groups. They can, of course, build better relationships. So we surveyed them, again, I was talking about this earlier, and the majority of them prefer the NTP because it is 1 to 3.
Okay, once you get into small groups, are there any issues with behaviour management for tutors?
No, none that are reported. We have behaviour management systems in place. They're trained to deal with different behaviours. No, there aren't really. But to be honest, there aren't in the bigger groups either. I think because the students are able to chat rather than to talk, teacher, it's easier for the teacher to ignore something that's going on, and they're encouraged often, depending on the types of students, to ignore sort of low-level disruption, if you like. It's easier to ignore it in the online environment, I think. But again, we just implement, positive behaviour for learning.
Yes, one of the feedbacks from schools about their remote learning that the teachers had to put on was that it could be difficult to deal with the low-level behaviours because parents were not supporting their children and some of the things that were seen on camera. So anyway, James, let me ask you, tutors' own personalities. Are there personalities that work and personalities that don't, or is it solely about the interaction with the student?
Well, I think, as with any walk of life, any workplace or relationship, I think diversity is really important because you'll be with all different sorts of students with different needs and interests. And so what we were trying to do at the beginning was define the kind of core behaviours that should align all of our tutors and have a really distinctive brand around that. So for example, like to give 1 or 2 examples, the communication skills should be really carefully tested. The empathy should be really tested. And so we have scorecards that we work against in our interview processes, and then we train against those things. But then when it comes to the, I guess, like what I've always described as the magic of MyTutor, it is really having that diverse set of personalities that are able to take a framework that's helpful, so like a structure, a pedagogy, a baseline understanding of how to be a good tutor, and then making the lesson their own. So we have tutors who do fantastic things in the lesson space. They bring their own personal life experiences and stories to the table, and they build like trust with the students in their own ways. And so like a big thing for us is always balancing the rigidity of like the must-haves of what you need to do as a tutor with the individuality and personality that comes through in the lessons. So I'd say personality is really important.
Yeah, okay, right. Simon, what do you need the tutors then, given that personality, I think we can establish is important. In a primary setting, what do tutors need to have in their toolboxes?
To be honest, our kids behave so well on the camera anyway, and they're only in small groups of 3. I think they really need to understand the kids and build a relationship with them. So the tutors that we've had some great feedback from tutors as well, which is always lovely to get, where they've had a really good session with the kids and they just email us and let us know, and that's wonderful to get that feedback, and the staff like that. But I think they need to have that sort of positive relationship with the children. The children, when they first joined, particularly in the first session, aren't aware. They've never worn headphones before. They've never sat with a virtual, I mean, they've seen virtual teaching on a big screen or at home on their Chromebooks, but to be in the school, down in a special area just for them for tutoring, and just to ease them into that initially at the beginning. And that's what the tutors did very well on our program for both areas, actually. So the children came on and they explained what the program was going to be, and they got to know the kids first, and the kids felt really comfortable with the tutor, and then the tutor could start challenging them as the weeks went on, and all the work was agreed beforehand. So the tutor was Tute were very transparent about what we would be covering, with agreement with ourselves. So it was just a case of and there was no behavior issues. If anything, we were really proud of our kids when they did it, and we got positive feedback at the end of all of the courses that we did with Tute. So, but I also think what tutors need. I know earlier on we were having discussions around whether there should be qualified teachers. That would shock some schools and head teachers that the tutors aren't of that caliber, possibly. Didn't particularly. I want somebody who's good with the kids and who's got a good knowledge of their subject to teach the kids. Doesn't have to be a trained teacher, as far as I'm concerned, but. Yeah, our tutors, the tutors that we've worked with, have all done a really good job of understanding the individual needs of the children, and because they're in a small group of 3 as well, I have to say, although I was reluctant to do 3s to begin with because I thought I'd like to cram a few more in, I think the 3s work very well, and because you're working in that 3, and if you match the abilities carefully of the 3 that are on the program, then it works brilliantly, and it's very smooth as they plug those gaps with the kids.
So we heard earlier that it's not just the 25% contribution towards the NTP costs of a school, but there are other costs, such as having a coordinator. Can you quantify that for a primary school?
Well, to be honest with you, all of our funding came from the trust. So our trust were brilliant and organised the national tutoring partners straight away, really. We've been quite early on in the game, and I know schools in Hull have been slower than us on the take-up of that offer. We've always been involved in it. I think we started talking about this back in November last year. So they've dealt with all the financial side of things for us. So really, the invoices that we get from the tutoring program just get sent directly to the central team. However, I have to say, if it's going to be a longer running process, which I hope it is, and we've already asked if we've got funding for next year, you're going to have to find some funding in your school budget for staff members to be with them. Because and the SLT member is just part of their role. I have an academic deputy who's in charge of the academic side of the school, so she takes hold of that side of the curriculum and that offer of tuition. But we were thinking of running it next year after school, because the issue in primary is they're missing other lessons. So you're cramming on something that's missing, but you're also missing your history, geography, your Spanish, your music, and we try and vary it around. And our partnership with Tute has been very good in accommodating our timetable, but we are still missing things. So we don't want them to miss a single thing. So we're thinking of moving the program to after school with an earlier finish, a bit like the secondary model that was discussed earlier, till 4 o'clock. you're going to need to pay staff for that, and that's going to have to come out of my budget, unless, of course, there's combination funding in the future, because it needs the adult from school to support it and listening.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Sam. So, Scott, what most helps? Got an echo. What most helps tutors when they get into a school?
So we're talking face to face now, or just you mean working with the school, introduced to a school?
Yeah, well, let's do both. Let's go from when they're introduced to the school first of all.
Yeah, I mean, with our model is we always have communication lines between the school and directly with the tutor, and that most of that is communicated through a platform, so not to distract the normal class teacher and class staff throughout the day, but they can access that feedback when they like, and they can also agree to Zoom calls in advance if they're not able to go inside, so that we start to really build a little community of tutors for that school, so that they're all on the same page in how it's going to work, and agree on the rollout, because not all our rollout's not the same all of the time. And when that online tuition is the choice of tuition, then we would always encourage communication from our tutors together as a collective, but sometimes it's one-to-one with the school, and it's not always committing to meeting everybody from the school, because it might be multiple subjects, so at least one point of contact, but sometimes that's multiple. But that's that tailored approach that we try and offer. Is we look at the school as the education experts and try and make sure we've got something available for them that works exactly as they like, and sometimes we promote a more prescribed way, which might be something that we've got a program that we've got that would work well based on the request for the tutoring.
Okay, and then imagine that tutoring was in school face to face. What would be needed?
Yeah, there needs to be clear communication and learning and personal outcomes agreed before the first session. So we always try and have our tutors meeting the class staff or the relevant person in the school before the first session starts. And that can even be on a different day at times as well. But sometimes it's before that first session starts. So they've got really clear actions in advance, so they can be well prepped, and it's already decided whether assessments need to be done before or at the start of that first session, or at all, because the school may have already completed that. And then it's much clearer to plan for those 15 hours.
Okay, thank you. And Vanessa, what are the big encouragements for a tutor? What most encourages an individual tutor in what they do?
Just getting the outcomes from the students, it just enthuses them, it inspires them.
Yep.
I think with anybody who wants to make a difference, you're already kind of part way there for them to work hard and to and to be professional and so on, particularly with teachers. And we don't depend, I wouldn't say, on their work ethic, but we know that they'll go a certain way. And I think in the same vein, they're there to make a difference, and once they see that they can make a difference, then that really is what motivates them. Of course, there are other things. We've got, like I said earlier, we bring them in as part of the team. We have to pay them well. We have to pay them in time. We need to make it operationally as straightforward as possible, because it's not just about the teaching and learning that creates good quality. It's also about the operations that sit around that. So our teachers will track progress, and they'll complete a progress track after every lesson. We need to make sure that that's as easy for them to access as possible, that there are as many resources in the bank as possible, so that they can edit and amend whatever they want. So operationally, we have to make it very straightforward for the tutors as well. Okay,
yeah, that's really good. That's answered my next question as well, actually. But let's ask James. Move on from the one I was going to ask. Why would a student want to leave their mates in the classroom and go to a tutoring session?
I think it goes back to my last comments around buy-in. So if you're telling a student to do something and not giving them context, then they're probably going to have a healthy skepticism, and it's not going to create the best relationship or engagement. If you're having a conversation with them about what their goals are and how a tutoring program can fit in with that, and it's collaborative and it feels like it comes from a place of respect between my tutor and the student, or the teacher, the school teacher and the student, that's where you're much more likely to get buy-in. So I think it's about having the respect to engage the student on a rational and emotional level, rather than just telling them this is how you need to be. And that sort of style definitely caused me some problems at school. I didn't like dynamics where I was told to do something without context, And so I just feel like students deserve that level of respect that we would give to other adults.
Yes, yeah. And are you able to encourage that in the way you train your tutors?
I certainly think we make an effort to do so. We speak a lot about what sorts of students they might be helping, what sort of backgrounds they might come from, what sort of challenges they may have had in their life. So I think when we structured our initial training, we had a decision to make with the amount of time that we thought we could buy in tutors for and invest in. We had to decide, do we obsess over pedagogy, or do we obsess over how to build trust and how to create effective relationships? And I think that obviously pedagogy is critical, but for me, no engagement comes without building that trust and that relationship. And we sort of doubled down on that investment. Yeah.
And again, the point that was made earlier. So yeah, an excellent point to make. Tom, on the expectations that tutors have for the students and pupils, how can you encourage tutors to have high expectations?
I think you've got to be quite careful with that. You want the tutor to have a high expectation of the job they perform. So I suppose the perspective I'm coming from is not just this year, but through the years, a lot of the children that we work with, it's all about, so lack of confidence is such a big challenge for them. And so if I took a simplistic view of high expectations of pushing that student forward, that can have a detrimental effect. So, and there's a theme here that's been touched on a number of times over the last hour about what are you training for? And James was talking about it there, like building rapport, to build engagement with the tutor, to build engagement with the topic, the concept, the lesson, to build confidence across that sequence of lessons and back into the classroom. That's such a critical part of what I think tutoring is about, particularly tutoring for children from disadvantaged backgrounds, and certainly in terms of how we train our tutors, how we performance manage our tutors, and kind of the instruction we give them in terms of, I suppose, the expectations for that. Like, it's all about building confidence and engagement. I mean, it's critical. In fact, that's when we track session and program success, we're tracking two things: so cognitive and affective. So cognitive is the assessments we provide at the beginning, pre and post session quizzes through each session, and then what we call mission zero at the end. So that's looking at the cognitive progress across that program and across every learning objective they cover. But then there's also the affective domain, which is what we're really focusing the training and the outcomes on, which is about the confidence that the students express at the beginning and then through that program of learning. And time again in our case studies, we speak with hundreds of teachers every week. The feedback we get is teachers saying that they see these children who've said nothing in class, starting to speak and build that engagement with their tutor one-on-one, and then bringing that vocalization of maths back into the classroom. So I'm probably laboring the point a bit, but I think there can be a suggestion that high expectation is driving attainment, which is of course an outcome you want. There's a risk to high expectation that you don't focus on the kind of the fundamentals of confidence, engagement, rapport that ultimately build long-term attainment goals that we're looking for. So I think you got to be quite careful in how you define high expectations for tutors, and particular types of children we work with.
Okay, and that's a really powerful message to bring us to an end of this session. I'm just going to ask one very quick question of Vanessa. In one short sentence, Vanessa, tell me something new you've learned about tutoring since the NTP started.
Oh, the pressure. One thing I've learned about tutoring, that we do it very, very well.
Okay.
That there's a place for it, and that students absolutely love it. They thrive from it. You know, what I found interesting, and what we've surveyed children, we asked them before the lessons, how do you feel? And you'd expect, excitement and stuff, but a lot of them are feeling curious, which I thought was really, really good. And a lot of them want to have an opportunity to do this before. So just seeing that there's a place for it and that children really thrive with it, I think, for me.
And I think that strength comes across from all of you. So thank you for this session today. So thank you, James, Vanessa, Zach, Scott, Tom, and Simon. And passing back to Ludo.
Well, thank you once again, St John, for taking us through that and for finishing on time, which can never be underestimated. An expert, a masterclass in how to bring together the different panelists and perspectives we have there. And we thank all of our panelists and partners, James, Vanessa, Scott, and Tom, and the school champion school leaders, Simon and Zach, for joining us for that. In just a second, we're going to be diving into our final session of the afternoon, which will be a session by Willem Abrook from LearnCube on how to deliver high quality online classes. So that'll be fairly relevant. But goodbye to all of our panelists, and thank you, St John, once again.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Cindy.
you.
Thank you, Ludo.
Many thanks. Take care.